Hey guys, Jeff with Gridiron Ratings back with you again. Let's talk about another metric that you're going to find only on gridironratings.com. This time it's running back workload. I know it's a really clever name, right? I know a lot of folks talk about workload and how much tread guys have left on the tire, especially for dynasty purposes. Now, I know back in the 90s and 2000s, especially the early part of the aughts, if you will, there was a lot of talk about the curse of 370. A guy gets 370 carries or so in a given season or a given stretch, and generally speaking, it led to injury. Well, in today's NFL, fewer backs are seeing that kind of workload. It doesn't mean workload doesn't matter. There are more NFL games now than there has been, and guys are still getting beat up quite a bit, right? So, what we try to do here is we take into account the type of workload guys are getting, put it into a figure that we can start to understand and assess when is it time to get out early on a player? Better to sell a year early than a year late? And how can we determine those guys that, they might be at the end, but maybe there's just a little bit left where we can buy them for one more season to try and get that last title out of them, right? So let's talk about running back workload score. The workload score basically just gives a guy a point for every carry he's getting and 0.75 points for every reception. Receptions weigh a little bit lighter in our formula simply because taking on a 180 to 200-pound defensive back is a whole heck of a lot different than taking on 230-pound linebackers or 300-pound defensive linemen. Just the pounds of pressure on the body changes quite a bit. You also have a lot more ability to maybe skirt out of bounds or otherwise avoid big hits. So that's kind of how that got started. There are two numbers that we like to look at. The first is 725. I like to keep guys below 725 workload score in any 33 game period. Okay. The reason why we're doing this is because a lot of workload in a truncated period can oftentimes turn into an injury the following season, or guys have major efficiency drop offs. You start to see these guys fall off in a way where they have a down year. Guys are like, oh, why do you have a down year in the middle of his prime? Well, it's probably because that workload the past 2 years was just a little too much, right? And I look back at some examples. DeMarco Murray, Christian McCaffrey, even Derrick Henry to a point have all had efficiency or injury related drop offs immediately following a 725 plus score in a 33 game stretch. I have some written content on this over on gridironratings.com. You can dig in a little bit deeper there. Uh, but the second number that we're looking at now is for dynasty folks. Career workload. 1600 is kind of a magic number. This is the point where we're in the danger zone of a guy completely falling off the side of the earth. So, what we want to do is avoid injuries, performance related drop off, efficiency drop offs, the whole bit. Generally speaking, a guy hits 1600, we're at the end of the road. Maybe you can get one more season out of him, but you're pushing it. The guys that have gotten to 1600 and have still had enough in the tank to provide at least an RB2 level season or better are guys like Derrick Henry. Frank Gore had one season. Matt Forte had a couple of seasons. It's a pretty short list, but as you can tell, the guys that did it were actually doing it through the air. Matt Forte is a great example of that. A lot of receptions once he cleared the 1600 career mark, and he ended up doing some really good things. We look at a guy like Frank Gore. He hammered it between the tackles on a really good 49ers team, but he also caught quite a few passes. That went kind of under the radar for most folks. But this number starts to really impede a player once he clears it. Ezekiel Elliott, well under 30 years old. We think about the 30-year-old wall. Not so much the case for him. He fell off much earlier in Dallas because he cleared that 1600 marker and his efficiency fell off the earth. Didn't get hurt, but man, his yards per carry, his yards after contact, all of those other metrics that we would look at to see how he's doing on a per carry basis really slid. We start to see that kind of with Derrick Henry the last two seasons as he's cleared the 1600 mark. And we have a few new players that are now new entrants to the 1600 club, that danger zone group. Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. We start to see these guys that are in that category, Joe Mixon. All of them are capable of catching passes, and I suspect they're going to have another year of productivity. But these are all guys that we should probably have a little bit more hesitation about as we're drafting them a lot higher than we probably should be. Christian McCaffrey's ADP is still in the top 3 in most formats. Despite his success in the San Francisco offense and all of that, there's reason to have pause with the sheer volume of workload they give him. It's entirely plausible that he's set up for some level of failure. I think 2024 is probably that last peak season for him, and then we're going to start to see that drop off. Let's start to use running back workload as a way to gauge, hey, when can I get out? At about 12 to 1300 is where I start to try and shop a player at the peak of his powers. He still has that elite season left in him, and you can probably still get quite a bit for him. So that's kind of how you start to use it, right? Who are you trying to buy up? Well, you want to find those guys that, get work in the passing game, get some volume in the run game, and have that workload, under 1,000, so you can get a couple of good seasons out of them. Most guys in a given season will put up a workload score somewhere around 200 to 300 if they're really good. So you imagine, hey, 300 per season. If I get a guy who's got a workload score of 1,000, I can get 2 really good years out of him before I've got to unload him, so to speak. All this does is give you a time frame of how long this player should be on your roster. So far, it's proven very effective. It allowed us to get out from underneath players like Ezekiel Elliott early. While Derrick Henry performed well last year, his efficiency was still pretty bad each of the last 2 years. He really got fat on a few games that, it was a big play here and a big play there where there were no defenders near him for 40 yards. That's not something you can count on from every single week or for every single player. Maybe it's a different situation there. But it has proven itself time and time again. Players like Dalvin Cook fell off the side of the earth. There's been a lot of these players over the last 20 some odd years, including players like Steven Jackson and even Matt Forte fell off, LaDainian Tomlinson. All of these guys were at that 1,600 mark when the end came. So let's start to show maybe some kind of hesitation with those players, start to peel back. Let's take a harder look at this running back workload. Tell me what you think. Hop in the comments. There's going to be players that might be close. You may love, hate, whatever. Go to gridironratings.com. Check out the running back breakdowns there. You're going to see a rankings list of all of the running back workloads that matter. Basically, anybody that's got over a score of a 100 or so. Rookies are obviously at a 0. We don't count college workload. Doesn't count. Everybody starts at a 0 when they come into the league. So go pop in there. I'm going to put some links in the description for the rankings list and for the written piece that we have on running back workload that takes you into a lot more detail and some of the background that's gone into this study and how we started to apply it. So I hope this helps, and it's another piece to your championship puzzle. Have a great one, and if you need anything, don't be shy. Hop on the Discord channel, leave some comments. We're here to help. Good luck. Take care.